Morning I played back that voice recording. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time without moving. My coffee went cold. The birds outside were doing their usual thing, carrying on like it was just another Tuesday in October. And I just sat there staring at my phone, listening to my own son-in-law talk about how much my life insurance policy was worth. I need to back up. My name is not important. What happened to me? That's what matters. I'm 67 years old, retired from 31 years as a civil engineer with the county of Maricopa, Arizona. My wife, Loretta, passed from ovarian cancer in 2019. We were married 42 years. After she went, the house in Scottsdale felt like a museum. Every room preserved exactly the way she left it. Her reading glasses still on the nightstand, her handwriting still on the grocery list stuck to the fridge. I couldn't bring myself to change much. Some people thought that was unhealthy. I thought it was the only honest thing I could do. My daughter was the one who kept me going that first year. She called every other day, drove up from Tucson on weekends, sat with me on the back porch while I didn't say much, and she pretended that was okay. She's the best thing Loretta and I ever did. I want to be clear about that, because this story is not about her. This story is about the man she married. His name was Preston. Preston Calloway. He had that quality some men have, the kind where you can't find anything specific to dislike, but something in your gut says watch yourself. Good looking, firm handshake. Called me sir the first year, then switched to dad right around the time my daughter's last name changed to his. He sold commercial real estate in Tucson. He drove a truck that cost more than I thought a real estate agent in Tucson should be able to afford. They got married in the spring of 2021, about 2 years after Loretta died. My daughter, Carolyn, was 34. Preston was 38. I stood at the altar in a rented suit and told myself the hollow feeling in my chest was just grief, not instinct. For a while, things were fine. They came up for holidays. Preston would help me with yard work he hadn't been asked to do, which I appreciated or thought I did. He always seemed to be calculating something, how big the lot was, what the neighbor's renovation had done to property values on our street, whether I'd thought about downsizing. I told him I hadn't thought about it. He said I should. The house was worth a lot more than when I'd bought it in 1994. He knew the exact number. I found that strange, that he'd looked it up. Around Christmas of 2022, I noticed Carolyn seemed quieter than usual. She laughed at all the right moments, but her eyes weren't in it. I asked her once, privately, if everything was all right. She said she was tired from work. She managed accounts for a medical supply company. Long hours, she said. I believed her, because I wanted to. Then Preston started asking about the will. It wasn't aggressive. That's what I want you to understand about how people like him operate. It was never a direct question. It was comments, scattered across different visits, that only added up to something when I lined them all up later. Have you had an estate attorney look at that? I have a guy in Phoenix if you need a referral. Probate in Arizona can get really messy, Dad. You don't want to leave that headache for Carolyn. Every time I'd nod and change the subject. Every time something pulled at me that I couldn't name. In February of 2023, I had a health scare. Chest pains, turned out to be nothing serious, an arrhythmia that my cardiologist said was manageable with medication and monitoring. But I went to the ER alone on a Wednesday night, called Carolyn from the waiting room, and Preston answered her phone, said she was in the shower, said he'd let her know. I lay in that hospital bed for 4 hours before she called me back. She said she hadn't known until Preston told her at breakfast. I didn't say what I was thinking. After that, something shifted in the way they visited. It became more frequent. Every 3 or 4 weeks they were driving up from Tucson, bringing food, offering to help around the house. Preston suggested I install a smart thermostat to cut down on my electric bill, and he offered to do it himself. I said sure. He went into the hallway closet where the control panel is, and he was in there a while, longer than it should have taken. I didn't think about it then. I had an old digital voice recorder on my desk, one of those handheld ones I used to use in the field when I was working. Punch in site dimensions, notes, whatever, hands-free. I've been using it the past couple of years to record reminders for myself, appointments, medication schedules, the kind of thing you start doing when you live alone and don't trust yourself to remember. I kept it on my desk in the study. That room is just off the hallway. I had gotten into a routine of pressing record in the morning and just leaving it running while I had coffee, because sometimes I'd think of something, and I wanted to be able to capture it. In late March, I pressed record and left for a doctor's appointment. What I didn't realize until almost 3 weeks later, when I went to use the recorder and saw the memory was nearly full, was that I had never pressed stop. The thing had kept running. It had been recording whatever happened in that study, and in the hallway just outside it, for a day and a half before the battery died. I almost deleted it without listening. I thought it was just ambient house noise. But something made me sit down and scroll to the middle of the recording. The first thing I heard was Preston's voice. He was not aware he was being recorded. He was in the hallway, just outside the study door, and I had apparently been out that day. I'd had a lunch with my old friend and former colleague, Stan, a habit we'd kept up since retirement. I remembered that day. I remembered coming home and finding them both in the kitchen, Carolyn making sandwiches, Preston at the table on his phone. Everything normal. Except what I heard on that recording was not normal. He keeps bringing up the arrhythmia like it's nothing, Preston was saying, his voice low, not quite a whisper but close. It's not nothing. You know what that kind of thing leads to. Carolyn said something I couldn't make out clearly. I'm not saying anything happens, he continued. I'm saying we need to be positioned, because when something does happen, and it will, Caro, he's 67 with a heart condition, we should not be scrambling. The house alone is listed at $840. His pension dies with him. The life insurance is $500,000. You're the beneficiary. You need to know where those documents are. You need to understand what you're getting. I stopped the recording. I sat there in my study and I looked at my hands on the desk. Steady. I was surprised they were steady. I pressed play again. He doesn't talk about it, Carolyn said. I could hear her better now. She must have moved closer. He doesn't tell me anything about money. That's the problem. You're his only heir and you don't even know where the paperwork is. A pause. When we were fixing the thermostat, I took a look around. He's got a filing cabinet in here. You should know what's in it. Preston. I'm not suggesting anything, Carolyn. I'm being practical. Your father isn't going to be around forever. Someone has to think ahead. That was the first part that made me feel sick. Not the part about money or houses. The part where he said, when we were fixing the thermostat. That word we. My daughter hadn't touched the thermostat. She'd been in the kitchen. He had done it alone. And then he had looked through my filing cabinet. I kept listening. There were hours of recording. Most of it nothing. Footsteps, television, dishes, but I found 3 more segments that mattered. The second one was Preston, alone, on a phone call I could only hear one side of. He was talking to someone, and what I could piece together from his side was this. He was describing a property, my property, and what it would sell for in the current Scottsdale market, and he was discussing what a commission would look like. And he said, and I wrote these words down exactly as I heard them, the timeline depends on factors I can't control yet, but I'd say inside 18 months. 18 months. The third segment was the worst. Preston and Carolyn again, and this time her voice was different. Harder. You need to stop pushing, she said. He's my father. I know he's your father. I also know we're $46,000 in debt on the business loan, and I know that his estate is the only realistic way out of that. A long silence. What exactly are you saying? I'm saying that we should be close. We should be here. We should be useful to him. So that when the time comes, and however the time comes, we are the people he trusts. And if the time doesn't come on its own. He didn't answer that. I stopped the recording and I didn't play it again. I want to tell you what I did next, because I think it matters. I did not call Carolyn. I did not call Preston. I did not call anyone. I sat in that study for a long time, and I thought about the fact that my daughter had not said no. She had said stop pushing, which is not the same thing. And I thought about the $46,000 I had not known about. And I thought about the word timeline. Then I called my lawyer. Her name is Beverly Strauss, and she's been handling my affairs since Loretta died. I trust her completely. I told her I had an audio recording that I needed her to listen to. I drove to her office in Scottsdale the next morning, and I sat across from her desk and I watched her face while she listened to the segments I had flagged. When it was over, she set the recorder down and looked at me with an expression that told me everything I already knew. "We're going to handle this carefully," she said. "The first thing we did was change the will. Full rewrite. The house would go to a charitable trust I established in Loretta's name, benefiting a cancer research fund at Mayo Clinic's Scottsdale campus. My financial accounts would be distributed between my two younger siblings and a neighbor's daughter who'd helped me through a hard year after Loretta died. Carolyn was not removed entirely. She was left a cash amount that Beverly helped me determine was appropriate, given the circumstances, and given that I still wasn't certain what she knew or had agreed to. But the bulk of it, Preston's $840 and the $500,000 he had calculated so carefully, all of it redirected. The second thing Beverly recommended was that I contact the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office and speak with a detective in their financial crimes division. We brought the recording. The detective, a patient man named, he told me to call him Ray, listened to everything twice, took notes, and told me that while the recording captured intent and conspiracy, we would need to be careful about how we proceeded if we wanted anything to hold up. He said the words elder financial abuse and conspiracy to commit fraud, and possibly more, depending on what investigation turned up about Preston's other activities. He asked me if Preston had ever actually touched anything financial without my permission. I told him about the filing cabinet. We decided together that I would not change my behavior. I would not tip my hand. I would continue answering Preston's calls, continue agreeing to visits, continue being the reliable, unsuspecting 67-year-old widower with the nice house in Scottsdale and the heart condition and the filing cabinet full of documents that now contained exactly nothing of consequence, because Beverly had helped me move everything that mattered. The next visit was 6 weeks later. Carolyn drove up alone, which surprised me, and she seemed agitated in a way she tried hard to conceal. She kept looking around the study. She asked, casually, if I'd given any thought to getting a home health aide, maybe just part-time, someone who could check in regularly. I said I appreciated the thought. She asked if I had looked into long-term care planning. I said Beverly had helped me with some of that recently. Something crossed her face. She tried to keep it neutral, and she asked what that meant. I said just routine updates. Nothing dramatic. Preston came 3 weeks after that, alone this time, claiming he was in Phoenix for work and just swinging by. He was smooth. He asked how I was feeling, how the heart medication was going, whether I'd had any more episodes. He said Carolyn worried about me. I said I was doing well. He suggested we have lunch, and over that lunch he brought up, for what I counted as the 4th time in 18 months, the idea of an updated will. He had a recommendation for an estate attorney. A good one, better than Beverly, he said, which was the first tactical mistake I'd noticed him make, because he wasn't supposed to know Beverly's name unless he'd been in that filing cabinet. I said I'd think about it. On the drive home, he asked if he could use the restroom before hitting the road. I said of course. He was in the back hallway for 12 minutes. I know because I checked the clock. There was nothing in the filing cabinet he could use, but what he didn't know was that Ray had been in contact with my neighbor, a retired county prosecutor named Gill, who had agreed to help keep an eye on things, and Gill's property camera covered my driveway and side entrance. Preston's behavior that day, combined with the recording, combined with what the Financial Crimes Unit had found when they quietly pulled records related to Preston's business loan, the lender, the amount, the delinquency, was enough. They arrested Preston Calloway on a Tuesday morning outside his office in Tucson. The charges were elder financial abuse, criminal conspiracy, and fraud. The investigation turned up a pattern. 2 prior associates who had made complaints about him related to estate-adjacent manipulation of elderly clients, neither of which had gone anywhere on its own, but both of which now became part of a larger picture. Carolyn called me that afternoon. She was crying and she wasn't performing it. I could tell. I have known my daughter for 34 years, and I know when her voice is real. She told me she hadn't known how far he'd taken it. She told me she should have stopped it sooner. She told me she was sorry in the specific way that people are sorry when they know sorry isn't close to enough. I listened. I didn't forgive her on that call, and I didn't refuse to. I told her I needed time. She said she understood. She filed for divorce 7 weeks later. The house is still mine. Loretta's reading glasses are still on the nightstand, and I still haven't moved them, but lately I've been thinking that maybe I should. Not because I want to forget her, but because I think she'd say, it's time to live in the house again, not just inside the memory of it. I changed the voice recorder battery and put it back on my desk. Not out of fear. Out of the knowledge that I am not as easy to fool as someone decided I was. I am 67 years old, and I know where every document in this house is. I know what my estate is worth, and I know the difference between someone who loves you and someone who is counting the days until you are gone. Nobody gets to count those days but me. I keep coming back to one moment. Not the recording itself, not the arrest, not even Carolyn's voice on the phone that Tuesday afternoon. I keep coming back to the morning I almost deleted the file without listening. I was tired. I figured it was just ambient noise, the house settling, the refrigerator hum, nothing worth my time. Something told me to sit down anyway. I almost didn't listen to that something. I'm glad I did. There's a version of this story where I never press play, where Preston's timeline unfolds exactly the way he planned it, where my arrhythmia, or something else, or eventually just time, does what he was counting on, where Carolyn, who I still believe was never fully in it, drifts further into whatever he was turning her into. That version exists. It was close, and what separated me from it wasn't luck, not entirely. It was the fact that I had spent 67 years learning to pay attention, and I hadn't stopped. Preston made a mistake that men like him almost always make. He assumed that because I was older, I was slower. He assumed that grief had softened my edges. He walked through my house, opened my filing cabinet, and calculated my worth in square footage and insurance policy numbers, and he did all of it while smiling at me across a lunch table. What he didn't account for was that I had spent 3 decades reading engineering plans, finding the flaw in the structure before it became a collapse. That habit doesn't retire when you do. I think about what it takes to get through something like this. Not just survive it, but come through it without becoming someone who trusts no one, who locks every door and waits for the next betrayal. It takes something I'd call a kind of moral clarity. Knowing what you stand for clearly enough that when someone tries to rewrite the story of who you are, helpless, declining, a resource to be managed, you can hold up your own version against theirs and know which one is true. Preston saw a widower with a heart condition. I knew I was something else. That knowledge protected me as much as any recording did. It also takes clear thinking, when clear thinking is the hardest thing to do. When I heard that recording, I wanted to call my son-in-law and say things I cannot repeat here. I didn't. I sat with it. I called Beverly. I let the process work. There's a real discipline in not acting on what you feel the moment you feel it, in understanding that the smartest move is often the quietest one. That discipline is something you build over a lifetime of hard choices. And I was grateful, in that moment, that I had built it. And it takes the willingness to keep going when the people you counted on have let you down. Carolyn hurt me. She didn't pick up the phone that night I was in the ER. She stood in my kitchen making sandwiches while her husband mapped out the value of my estate. I don't know everything she knew or agreed to. What I know is that I didn't fold. I didn't stop showing up for myself just because she had stopped. That took something. I won't pretend it didn't. Loretta used to say that the people who try to take from you reveal exactly what they think you're worth. I think she meant it as a warning. I've started to think of it differently. Preston thought I was worth a house and a policy. I walked out of this knowing I was worth something he never bothered to calculate, the kind of person who, when given the chance to quietly disappear into someone else's plan, chooses not to. That's not nothing.